Well, hey everybody, and welcome to tonight's Constitutional Considerations here on Tactical Review. I'm Blair. I will be joined, hopefully, shortly by Elias of the Liberty Review podcast. There's some weather rolling down through his area. He informed me that the tornado sirens were going off and he's having computer problems, so we will see what comes of that. While we're waiting, I see, well, Randall's been here waiting. He popped in this afternoon at almost just before 5. He assures me that he has not been here that entire time. We've got brownies in the house. How you doing, brownies? My wife made some homemade brownies this afternoon, and yeah, she has taken up baking to help pass the time during these stay-at-home days, and I'm going to gain 10 pounds. So, anyway, good to see everybody. We've got a great show planned for tonight. Of course, as I've said before, Elias brings the brains to this conversation, so really hoping for him to get joined. No, they weren't hash brownies. They were just regular brownies. Although they're good enough and addictive enough, maybe they were laced with crack. I don't know. Well, sorry, I had a late night last night, and so in Monster we trust. Anyway, while we are waiting on the rest of the party to show up, I'd like to start with a couple of... I don't need these on right now. Oh, having headphones on when you don't need headphones on is kind of annoying. Anyway, I want to start with some kind of product shout-outs. First off, well, hold that thought. Elias is back online, so one moment. Technical difficulties. Actually, weather difficulties. All right, I have established an audio link with Elias. There's a video link, and let's see if we can get you into... I am able to see you. Everything looks good at my end. Yeah, having the right thing plugged in the right place is helpful. All right, I'm going to kick this over.
Yeah.
And
can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can hear you just fine.
All right.
And Josh Roberts is in the house. How you doing, Josh? Thanks for joining. George Washington needs to know where you can get spare parts for a Bradley APC. Unofficially, the local National Guard Armory. You didn't hear that here. So, anyway, actually, Elias, we really hadn't gotten very far into this.
Now it's...
Family's all good and everything?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Unfortunately, we got hit with a storm right before this happened, and tornado sirens are going off right about 9 o'clock. So
Perfect.
And then my computer decided not to restart, which made things a little bit more difficult.
Oh, no, Randall, Elias is actually on video feed tonight. It's not audio only. That turned out to be my fault. When Microsoft switched everybody to Windows 10 and they strongly insist on updates, when you bypass that system, they get crabby. And then stuff doesn't work right. So, anyway, yeah. Fun times. So, I was starting out, I was just getting ready to say, talk about some products that are out there. Of course, we're going to give unfortunately, it's going to be an incomplete shout out to to the firearms industry as a whole. I guess we could say it that way. But before that, well, for one thing, I am just convinced that the entire city of Las Vegas is shut down, and I have composite plates that are half the weight of the AR-500 armor that I have sitting in a depot in Las Vegas, and that's upsetting to me, but that's neither here nor there. But here a few weeks back, I had somebody give me a little bit of feedback on flux defense. Not on the brace itself, because he had not received his brace. He finally got that brace in today after only waiting for 17 weeks and 5 days. If you... Alright, I know there's several small business people, whether it's a side business, whatever, who watch the streams. And I do side work myself. I get sometimes there's things beyond your control. You get behind, whatever it is. That happens. You just need to communicate with your customers. When you tell somebody that they have a 6-week pre-order, if you're not going to get their stuff to them until 17 weeks, maybe communicate with that. Especially, let's face it, the Flux brace isn't a $100 add-on for a Glock. It is the price of a second pistol. So, anyway, I don't have any feedback yet on the Flux brace itself, but I will say their customer service, the one review, and I'll grant you that's one review, that I've had on their customer service is a little lackluster. So, and since that's part of what this channel is about, I told him that I would forward that to you, my wonderful viewers. All right. Let's see, Hunts for Life, how you doing? Welcome. Who's this Liberty Review guy that's in here? All right.
I don't know. Don't trust him. He's never on time to anything.
Well, in fairness, he had a tornado trying to eat his new truck, so.
Right now, I've got a 3-year-old in here.
Hey, it happens. At least
apparently,
at least your studio's in the basement. So.
Yeah.
So
that makes it a little easier.
Yeah. So anyway, let's get this show on the road, and we are going to start with a little bit of a touchback to a previous subject. We're not going to hang out on this for very long, but we've spoken for a couple of live streams. We have talked about, House Resolution 5717, which is the firearm registration, assault weapon ban, firearm and ammo tax, just absolute kissing the hand of the monarch. Of course, Tim from Military Arms Channel, he's very in touch with with all things Second Amendment as well, and he did a Facebook post concerning HR 5717. So USA Today picked up his Facebook post, and they did a story about that. I had linked that somewhere. Oh, I've got too many tabs open. Guys, this is a disaster. That's not it. That's ABC, not USA Today. I can't find the link as per the norm. And I'm going to say, usually I've done everything I can to not read USA Today since I think 2006. They had some very seriously biased reporting that just completely turned me off to them. And I really, the only reason I was reading them at the time is because it was complimentary at the hotels I was staying at. But anyway, they did fact check Tim. Yeah, I came up with the conclusion that he was correct, and then the entire rest of the article was basically spent quoting politicians who just are in love with the idea of 5717. So, once again, representatives are supposed to be back in session here in 12 days. So make sure that you have reached out to your elected representatives, your congressmen, and tell them no to those assault weapons bans. Again, there's going to have to be a lot of people really asleep at the wheel, really not have their finger on the pulse of the nation to pass those. But we, the voters, falling asleep is why things like that do get through.
Right, and that's one of the things to remember is the chance of it getting out of committee is pretty low. The chance of it passing the House is low. The chance of it passing the Senate's almost non-existent, and it's not there. And the House definitely doesn't have the votes to override a veto. So, but it is a good time to remind your congressmen, your senators, how you feel about the subject.
Oh, all right. What's going on in the chat? Colt match, target H bar, DNL Armory. They had some ammo. Yeah, Huntsville. Actually, this afternoon I had to make a grocery run as much as I didn't want to. There's some things that we didn't get in the grocery order last week. So I swung by local farm and home store, and amazingly, they had not just the 2 brands of ammunition that I tested for you guys last weekend. They actually had, on top of those, some Blazer Brass, some Remington Brown Box, and some Winchester Brown Box, and several boxes of all of those brands in 9mm on the shelf. They had some, well, they've had quite a bit of 40. They had some 45. Still didn't have any 223. Part of the reason that they're able to start putting stock back on shelf is they are limiting every purchaser to 2 boxes of ammo. And that is not 2 per caliber, that is 2 in total. So if you were there to pick up some 9mm and some 12 gauge, you can get a box of each. Anyway, but yeah, ammo on shelves again, that's good to see. I saw toilet paper on the shelf at Walmart. I did not see any hand sanitizer or Lysol spray, but it is what it is. Poor Conservative, you're in the house. I'm not sure if I had seen you yet or said hi, but hello. And thanks for joining. And Mark 18's back with us today. Powers that be are burning it all down. Those of us who are survived this, waiting through. There's a chance of that. And I definitely feel the sentiment that we have no representatives. It definitely, it definitely feels like as soon as they're in office, they shrug off every promise that they made during their campaign and are now the representatives of the lobbies. So, but that's why we got to hold them to the fire there.
Pretty much, yeah.
All right. And Elias, don't worry about the background noise, man. I've got 4 kids myself, so no worries.
I wasn't sure how bad it was coming through, so I'd kind of switching off the microphone here and there.
It happens. I've had a lot of extra editing in my standalone videos because people will stand right outside my office door and have loud conversations, and the lapel mic picks it all up. So.
Well,
anyway,
normally they're in bed by now, but storms happen.
Yeah. All right. So, I've bad-mouthed Flux Defense, and again, maybe they're an amazing company, and this is a one-off. But for them to get 17 weeks behind, that's pretty big. Anyway, I would like to give a shout out. The one that I've seen referenced most recently was Versa Carry. They have converted part of their production facilities to make masks and face shields. Somewhere out there, I have seen an infographic that had a list of all of the firearms manufacturers who have retooled or partially retooled to make personal protective equipment for the medical industry, and just to get it back on the shelves as CDC recommendations and stuff are changing. I cannot find. I've looked all day. I can't find the infographic. I can't find a list. I would be remiss if I tried to start naming companies because I may be misremembering. Anyway, but there are tons and tons of companies in the firearms community that are retooling to try to help, since a lot of our medical supplies come from China. A lot of our everything comes from China. And well, there's a couple of things. Number one, they seem to still need it even though they have no new cases. The rest of the world still needs medical equipment. And I think we've all seen the very disturbing images going around social media where the workers, number one, they're subjected to very inhumane work conditions, but number two, they seem to have no respect for the fact that the items they're supposed to be producing are supposed to be sterile. So, if you haven't seen those videos, just Google face masks rubbing on feet, things like that. You'll find them.
It's really kind of disturbing how much we depend on China. I mean, it's one thing to depend on them for junk, but the fact that we depend on them for medicine and medical supplies and things like that's really uneasy.
Yeah, there's... And here's the problem, is that I'm afraid after all this is over, nothing's going to change.
No, it won't.
Because the dollar is king. And unfortunately, I mean, that was kind of like the core basis of my whole channel, is intentionally buying cheap stuff from China and seeing what works and what doesn't. But I'm going to stand by what I've said from basically day one, that if you're putting your life on it, maybe spend a few dollars more. And hey, look, we're right back to medical and life-saving equipment. You know, I would not buy a Chinese knockoff tourniquet. I'm going to spend the extra $5 and buy directly from North American Rescue. So, hey, that sounds like something I should maybe do for a giveaway next month. May is Stop the Bleed month.
Hey, there you go.
Hey, that's a good idea.
There you go.
And speaking of firearms companies, here's one that we've got some late breaking news on. And so we are going to update the narrative as we have been told it. So I'm sure a lot of you guys, if you're on social media, you have seen the snippets and the headlines going around that New York Mayor Andrew Cuomo, right? Is that right?
Governor.
Cuomo. Okay, Cuomo. Anyway, allegedly, Remington had offered to build respirators to relieve the situation, the dire situation that New York State is in. And Cuomo declined and instead ordered respirators from China. And now those respirators are delayed, and so people are dying. And we found new information. I say we. Elias this afternoon actually did some really awesome investigative reporting for this week. Hats off, man. Not your hat. Your hat looks great. But anyway, I think it was 7:45 that you sent me that message and said, "Hey, hold off. We gotta change what we know about this story because we didn't know what we knew." Yeah. So, all right. hey, Warsaw Patriots in the house, and he wanted to point out that Cuomo is a mafia-affiliated corrupt governor. Now, that may still be fully accurate.
I won't dispute that.
However,
I don't think you can get into a position in New York without being affiliated somehow with the mafia.
But not officially, of course, because then you swim with the fishes.
Not officially, no.
But
no, never officially.
Anyway, so I was trying to eat supper when you sent me that. I kind of glanced at it.
Sorry.
So no, it's okay. What was that you had found?
So, and what I wanted to see was if there was any new news, because the last thing I had seen was from about a week ago, and was that Cuomo hadn't accepted it, and that's pretty much everything they had. Was that Remington was saying they hadn't heard anything. But on one of the sites was a comment where somebody said that Remington had not actually offered to make respirators. They were just offering warehouse space to build it, manufacturing space rather. So I kind of dug a little bit deeper and I actually found the video message that the CEO of Remington sent out, and it never actually says that Remington will make them. It actually does say, he only says, he kind of leaves it very vague. He just says, we've got manufacturing space that you can use to manufacture, or that can rather, I'm sorry, we have manufacturing space that can be used. And any attempts by the mainstream media even to kind of understand, what is the logistical? Are you guys doing it? Are you going to build them? Are you just giving them rooms so other people come in, build them? What? All of those calls, all those requests were ignored. They were never answered. I actually tried calling the press line there at Remington, and that went to a voicemail box that was full. So I'm not saying that the stories are wrong, that they're not going to build them or that they have not offered to build them. I'm just saying that all they pretty much say is, we'll give you space. And that's the only thing. Then they leave it kind of open after that. So, in other words, not saying that Cuomo's a good person, everybody should go out and vote for him, just kind of that reminder that we were doing last week of careful what you're repeating, because it may not necessarily be true.
Right.
Or at least it may not be the full truth.
And we're going to revisit that sentiment later on. And probably about every week, because it's really easy. Heck, my Facebook page has even, in fact, been flagged because I shared what appeared to be a legitimate quote from Adolf Hitler talking about gun control. We know that the Nazis absolutely did use registration and gun control, and they disarmed the populace, and et cetera, et cetera. That's true.
True. Very true.
The quote was not accurate. It was not anything that Hitler had ever said. Again, that doesn't mean Hitler's a great guy. What that means is that I wasn't paying attention, and what I shared was inaccurate, and my Facebook page now has been flagged as inaccurate. And, by and large, PolitiFact is very left-leaning. I've caught them on things where they're definitely splitting hairs on what they're, on how they're saying, no, that's not true. So we did have a couple people point out in the chat that if the ventilators were built by modern day Remington, that you might be better off not having one in the first place. So yeah, I mean, and I think I'm not sure how much Blair actually likes sharing anything with me anymore, because I'm very skeptical person, so I have a tendency to go dig into anything I see if it looks remotely off. It doesn't really matter what side of the political spectrum it comes from. I don't really trust any of it. That. And so there are a lot of times where you'll send me something and I'm like, hey, hold on a second, hang on. But that keeps me honest. So, and that's going to keep me a little bit out of trouble. So
it also keeps you trustworthy.
And Warsaw pointed out the Soviets and their gun control were worse than what Germany did. And here's the funny thing is that a key tenet of socialism actually is that the populace is to, in fact, maintain their armament, because the power is supposed to be in all of the people in socialism. In communism, the whole, all material goods belong to everybody. They share that sentiment. sentiment, but then communism wants a disarmed populist,
Right.
because the central government wants all the power. So, which is where I really had some Bernie bros frothing in the mouth when I pointed out, no, when you look at what Bernie said, he's a communist. He's not a socialist. He's a communist. And, you know, as of today, that's not even a discussion anymore. But anyway.
Yeah.
So, all that said, again, Cuomo not a great guy necessarily, but didn't just spit in Remington's face.
Right.
And, you know, yeah, they're struggling for ventilators in New York. They, well, that's what.
Well, today, going by the official numbers, I say official because we don't actually know what's going on in China. New York is now leading the entire world. There's more cases in New York, confirmed cases in New York, than any country.
Oh, good.
Outside the United States, obviously, because we include it. But if you were to look at Italy, Spain, all that, we're higher than all of them in New York alone. So.
Fantastic.
Whether you like the government there or not, whether you like the people there or not, that's still people dying that are Americans and are people in general, and that is something to be concerned about. So.
Right. Hunts for Life. Does this mean that all Democrats are communist? I would say no.
No.
Because
that's too broad. Democrat contains too broad of a spectrum.
Right, and that's the thing where we've talked about this before. Since we have allowed our system to devolve into a two-party system, I would say that the vast majority of Americans feel disenfranchised because, and I am one of those who feels disenfranchised. I do not feel represented by what I see as the values of the Republican Party at the higher levels. And I know, well, Elias and I have friends who typically vote Democrat, and they absolutely do not feel represented by today's Democrat Party. So, yeah. Mark 18, I think that Elias might argue with you on that. Nobody knows anyone with COVID-19.
I mean, yeah, I know a few people who have it, including our priest, his wife, deacon back up north that I know, along with a couple other people. As for the stimulus checks, well, they haven't sent them out, so nobody would know anyone with that yet. Those aren't set to go out until starting next week,
right?
For direct deposit. So I would argue that your first one is wrong, but your second thing is correct because they haven't been sent out yet.
Warsaw Patriot says the Democrat Party is responsible for creating the KKK, the Nazi American Party, and the Communist American Party. Democrat Party also created segregation for different nationalities. I don't see anything there that I would call inaccurate, Warsaw Patriot. The funny thing is that the Democrat, okay, again, broad term, the Democrats want to blame virtually all of that on Republicans. So, Big Mad, police in Baltimore caught intentionally coughing on people. I wish I could say that surprises me, and that goes both ways though, because I've read other news stories about people who were going around intentionally coughing on people who are not police. Yeah. In the best of times, that is assault. So, and when
a lot of people don't realize you can actually be arrested for like spitting on people and stuff like that is considered assault.
Yeah, because there's a lot of our saliva is filthy.
Oh yeah. I mean, this is just kind of the biggest thing going on right now. But there's a lot of things you can get sick with. So,
yeah.
yeah.
I don't want any of y'all spitting on me. Please. Thank you.
No.
That's gross. There's a reason that that's always been like one of the highest forms of disrespect. I mean, it's just nasty. And we're going to talk more about police here after a while. So, as you can see from the title, what's worse than Antifa now? Warsaw, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of things that are probably technically worse than Antifa, depending on who the Antifa member is and how many of them there are. I'll let Warsaw come back with that. And we are going to flip over here. I haven't been copying and pasting links. Warsaw Patriot, look up Patriot Front. They are neo-Nazis dressed in disguise as American patriots. Once again, I wish I could say that surprised me.
I was going to say, that doesn't surprise me, sadly.
All right, let me clean up this link. I love it when things... that... Hunts for life. Antifa are people who are idiots. Yeah. Mark 18 says credible info that death certificates are being falsified, listing cause of death. Now, I will say that I have heard reports that the CDC is telling coroners' offices that if they even think that a death may have been related to COVID-19, to put that down, and that's wrong. That's wrong of the CDC to say.
It's hard because it's hard to figure out what exactly is going on.
Right.
And I could say, I mean, I'll be that guy that plays devil's advocate. I can see what the CDC is trying to do, especially when there aren't tests and we're not getting people tested. They're trying to get an accurate number because they want to be able to do this for analysis later on. But
the problem is by misattributing deaths, to me, those deaths that are questionable need to remain questionable in this case because of the people who aren't getting tested, that only have light symptoms and think that they have the cold, and that's going to help.
Right.
That's going to help offset that.
I'm going to say, we need to be careful when we're dealing with conspiracy theories because it's really easy to, what's the word I'm looking for? Disrespect those who have passed away because of a pandemic because we don't want to believe it. The fact of the matter is, diseases exist. This is something that's happened throughout the history of the world. It's very possible. It's very much within the realm of possibility to have a pandemic like this that spreads quickly. It happened 100 years ago. It happened many, many times throughout history. So, the idea of a pandemic spreading like this is not really that surprising. It's kind of like what we said before, that, I don't believe that the government manufactured this. I don't think we're being lied to. I do think the governments will try to take advantage of the situation because that's what they do. They take advantage of really bad situations to further their power. So I don't really like saying that it's a conspiracy theory and it's not really happening because to me that's just being disrespectful for those who have passed away. The fact that people have died from this. And it's also disrespectful to the families of the people who have died because they're dealing with the grief, and then to be told, and for people to act like it's not really happening.
The other thing is there's a serious spread of disinformation, absolutely. Could you call that being lied to? I suppose, because now a lot of what the World Health Organization was saying is looking somewhat alarmist as we get more information. But part of that is where the disease started. Okay, now I'm a racist, that Chinese virus. But the fact of the matter is that I don't believe any information coming out of China. it's a quarter of a step more reliable than information coming from official sources from North Korea. They are an absolute totalitarian communist government with a track record of human rights travesties. They are more worried about impressions and overall financial situation than they are about any tens of thousands of humans' lives. I in no way believe the official numbers coming out of China, because when you look at it, all right, number one, we know so much more about this disease now than we did when the outbreak started, obviously. So how is it that in as densely populated an area as China, knowing what we know about how this disease spreads and et cetera, how could they possibly have that much lower of it? So that's, you know.
And, you know, we have to remember something. When you're dealing with the Chinese and you're dealing with the communist government, there's not really any sanctity of life. So for them, you know, part of this whole thing of their initial control was most likely they didn't realize what was going to happen and they didn't really care. They probably figured, you know, okay, so people are going to die, whatever. You got to keep the factories open, got to keep supplying, which this is the part where I go slightly liberal and say that's our fault. Of being a consumer society that puts such a high demand on it. But anyway, they got to keep the factories open. And that's kind of what they're doing now. They're trying to get those factories open. They got busted on it. And so then they try to do a whole little, and shut the factories down temporarily. But as soon as they can, they're going to start them back up because they don't care. They also don't care if it spreads outside the country. They just really don't care. So where it all came from, I don't know. There was the one doctor that was pretty much had a huge bounty on his head because he was trying to get out as much information to the world as he could, and he ended up dead officially from the virus, but who really knows when you're dealing with that kind of totalitarian government. But the fact of the matter is, we're not it's hard to really know I don't know exactly what scientists have been able to discover so far. I know there's some key aspects, but the fact is we really don't know how it spread. We also don't know I'm okay with entertaining the idea that it was on purpose that it was spread by the Chinese. It may have even been a test for all we know because, like I said, there's no sanctity of life, so testing on humans. I mean, heck, our own government in the U.S. tested on humans. Tested on our own population. So it's not really outside the realm of possibility that China's testing something on their own possibility. It gets out of hand, and now China's trying to hurry up and cover themselves up in front of the world because they know how bad this can end on them. So I'm perfectly fine with even saying that this was something that some kind of experiment that went wrong in China. Many apocalyptic movies have been made on that premise of something going wrong with an experiment. And I'm fine with entertaining that. That would not surprise me at all. This thing just got out of hand.
That's definitely, you're not the first person to voice that thought process with as high key as the Hong Kong protests were. Yeah, I absolutely...
The Chinese government needed to do something. So who knows? Like I said, it could be one of those things that it just went wrong. They thought they had control of it and didn't appreciate how communicable it was. So who knows? Will we ever find out the truth? Very, very unlikely.
Right. But while we're talking about political response to the virus, let's talk about... is that Ohio representative? Is that right? Yes.
Oh, yes, the one that doesn't understand how the world works. One of the many that doesn't understand how the world works. So I think it was like 5 minutes ago. I dropped a link into the chat if you guys want to read up on this a little bit more. But Ohio this is fun.
Democratic state representative, got a name here, Tavia Golansky, intends to file crimes against humanity charges against President Trump, having to do, I guess, with his response to the pandemic?
Yes, feeling that his response to the pandemic was a quote-unquote crime against humanity. Yeah, except there's a couple key points about that the representative's not really clear on.
Well, for one thing, once again, this goes back. If you look at a timeline of intended responses, every time that President Trump recommended a drastic response, he was shouted down and called a racist.
Correct.
And again, I'm not Trump's biggest fan here. Okay, so don't paint me with that brush either. He's got plenty of things that he does wrong. He is definitely a narcissist, but
that's a big but. Yeah. He is demonized by the left any chance they get. So anything, the smallest little thing will immediately set them off, like saying stop all travel from China.
So just real quick here, for those of us who haven't studied international law in any way, what is a crime against humanity? I've played Cards Against Humanity.
So a crime against humanity is actually defined by the International Criminal Court as a very narrow set of things, and I'm gonna try to bring it up really quick. I'm using my laptop, and normally I don't for these kind of things, and it really doesn't like what I'm doing right now. So I'm gonna stall by talking.
Well, Warsaw Patriot just gave us a really good example. Genocide is a crime against humanity.
Correct. Let's see. Crimes against humanity are certain acts, so they're actually defined by the International Criminal Court. It's not just I don't like it, so it's a crime against humanity. Here we go. Mostly it is war crimes, murder, massacre, dehumanization, genocide, ethnic cleansing, deportations under certain circumstances, unethical human experimentation, extrajudicial punishment, including summary executions, using weapons of mass destruction, state terrorism, yada yada. None of those include not being as fast as I want in response to a pandemic.
The only thing that he might have triggered in that list was deportations, and you said in certain,
yeah, there's certain cases. It's not just it has nothing to do with deportations because somebody illegally came over a border. So here's the biggest problem though with the representative, and where she didn't study in school somewhere. The United States never ratified the Rome Statute. And what that means is the United States is not subject to the International Criminal Court in any way, shape, or form. No American is subject to the ICC. So she can go there and she can say, I want to drop charges all day long, and they're going to look at it and say, okay, that's great. There's nothing we can do about it. You guys are not a party to this court. So what she's doing is either she doesn't know, in that case she's ignorant, and she needs to read up a little bit if she's going to be in that kind of position and make those kind of accusations. Or two, she's just trying to pretty much create some drama. And I think that might actually be a bigger one.
All right, Mark 18 said Trump had an executive order concerning crimes against humanity, signed it just prior to Epstein's last arrest. So, no, I was not. The only Trump executive order that I am very familiar with is, of course, the infamous bump stock ban. So I find one here December 21st, 2017. And I'm not going to be able to scan read this fast enough. I'm not sure. I will try to remember to revisit this then. We can maybe...
I'm going to see if I can find a really quick synopsis of it.
I'll drop you the link here, Elias, and you are so much better at Englishifying those. Right. Democrats like to blame all Republicans for everything that happens in our country. Ask Democrats what they've done for the last 4 years, and the answer to that is try to impeach the president. That's really the only answer I have to that. So let's talk some good news. I'll let you read that while I bring this one up. And of course, we all know, because the mainstream media has told us it is so, that the more gun laws there are and the fewer guns that there are in the hands of everyday citizens, the safer our streets are. However, in Brazil, in 1997, they passed a law which required gun owners to have an unblemished police record and pass rigorous psychological and shooting proficiency tests in order to continue being a gun owner. That sounds a whole lot like most of what I hear the anti-gunners saying that they would consider to be a utopia. And here's the link to the article that I am referencing from AmmoLand News. Somewhere they had homicides in Brazil were at a historic high in 2017 in spite of those laws. They had here's the numbers I'm looking for. So their homicide rate in 2017 was 30.8 per 100,000. So let's, all right, I didn't do as much. I didn't do quite as much research as I intended to. Okay, to put that in perspective, I'm going to use the United States 2018 numbers because, you know, we've got all these scary guns and the rest of the world doesn't know what our infatuation with guns is. And we're just the most violent place that anybody can consider because of all the guns. In 2018, the United States murder rate was 5 per 100,000. In 2017, Brazil's was 30.8, nearly 31 per 100,000, aka over 6 times the homicide rate. So they did drop it quite a bit in 2 years to 19.83 or 20 per 100,000. That's still 400% of the United States violent crime rate. But that precipitous drop comes because their new president, sorry, I had to see what title he had. He has really been putting out some sweeping gun reform in the opposite way of the way the Democrats want to do sweeping gun reform in the United States. Okay, hang on, I did that again. I said Democrats. I meant statists because there are statists on both sides of the aisle. I promised you guys I'm going to try to do better about that. I've failed you. I'm sorry. I should now go commit honorable seppuku. Anyway, congratulations, Brazil. Guys, keep fighting for getting those gun rights back. Number one, we understand how hard it is to regain rights that you've lost. And perhaps we can use this as evidence in our own battle to keep our rights here in the United States. Out of the corner of my eye, I have seen the chat scrolling. Warsaw, guns are only scary because people are uneducated. I absolutely agree. You know that's my stance, absolutely. Hunts for Life, Great Britain, ask them what kills people. Knives, hammers, cars, you forgot acid, yes. It's not unheard of in Great Britain at this point to have to produce photo ID to purchase cutlery. And I'm not talking about, going down to a blacksmith and getting a sword forged. I am talking about going and buying a chef's knife to prepare dinner. So
They can't trust
Well,
them.
it's almost like the guns aren't the problem, and that violent people are going to be violent, and yeah, people are.
Sir, that doesn't fit the
Right?
narrative,
Yeah,
though.
I know. Okay,
Yeah, that
got to
disarms
disarm the
populace.
populace. Have you had a chance to dig through that executive order? And
Yeah, really quick. It looks like it was a quick way to sanction a bunch of people. There was an initial 17 people that were sanctioned under this, and other ones have been sanctioned since. I mean,
so basically, though, this guy that we are wanting to bring up on charges of human rights violations has signed executive orders to protect human rights. Is that what I'm getting from this? Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So, some of you guys are going to Mark 18, I can carry a potato peeler concealed. Yeah. You know what's funny, though, is that I can't find anything on this table behind me. Oh, yeah. No. So in a YouTube live stream, I can show this all I want, but I cannot handle the tools around which my channel is built. Because reasons. And allegedly this is so that people don't live stream homicides. But what?
Which I think the vast majority of people handling firearms on YouTube were not shooting
people. Yeah, like
people.
Nearly 100%. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, we're talking like 5 nines there.
What? Aside from the fact that I would not do this, but if I were of the mindset, what would prevent me from live streaming a homicide using that?
Because people don't kill people with knives. The guns cause it all, so.
Now, that said...
No, it doesn't. That's the problem. To them, it does, and that is
now,
the
that
problem.
said, though, has everybody seen the video of the guy who was just nonchalantly handling the handgun on his Twitch stream and had a negligent discharge? That, I think that was shared in one of the Discords that we are both on, actually, Elias.
Probably.
He was banned from Twitch. He lost all of his Twitch. He was a pro gamer, and I guess that was what you call a pro gamer move.
Yeah, I'm okay with that because
absolutely,
stupidity.
Absolutely, it is, and we are at the end of the day responsible for our own actions. And man, that just seems like a really good segue to the last subject of the night, and we're not quite there yet.
Did you see, speaking of dumb people doing things like that, did you see the one who he was a firearms instructor?
Oh, you're gonna have. What are you talking about, Voda?
And,
I caught him out. Oops.
No, he had a revolver. I think it was Magnum, and he's playing around with it, trying to teach people. And almost the one guy jumped back a little bit because of the way he was pointing it, and then he points it down range, and then as he's moving it, he fires it.
I have seen that.
And the guy's like, "Did you do it on purpose?" He's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Yeah."
Mark 18.
He needs to be
I don't think that this knife takes Glock mags. I think it's because it's a cold steel knife. I don't have a Glock. I have handled one of the Glock combat knives, and they are pretty nice. They seem like really decent blades. Anyway, Warsaw Patriot, people have even been killed with blunt tools. As a matter of fact, based on the last several years of crime statistics, you are more likely to be murdered by a blunt instrument such as a hammer or bare hands and feet, throat punch Thursdays, than you are with one of these scary black rifles. And obviously most likely to be murdered by a handgun because it's like they're easy to conceal or something. 1911, saw a video on YouTube talking about a new shotgun, went off into a ceiling. Yeah, we've all seen videos of negligent discharges. I did see one idiot that said that if you don't have a negligent discharge that you are not working with your firearm enough, and I disagree with that.
Oh yeah, I know. I vehemently disagree with that. That's like saying that if you're not driving your car correctly, if you never have an accident, that's not correct whatsoever.
Obviously, the more you drive your car, the more likely you are to have an accident. The more you handle a firearm, the more likely it is that you become overly comfortable and complacent. I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't happen. Obviously it does. I've been very fortunate that all of my accidental discharges, the muzzle of the weapon has been pointed downrange, almost like, always keep the barrel of a weapon pointed in safe directions. One of those rules you're supposed to abide.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so it's been a matter of I was firing and I rode the reset too closely, and so got a almost like a bump fire out of my pistol. So still pointed downrange. The one true accidental discharge I've ever had was with an old side-by-side dual trigger break action 410 shotgun. Something was bad inside, and when I closed the action, it dropped the firing pin. There was something seized up inside there. Even more frightening is my father was downrange. So fortunately, because my father was downrange, and he had drilled into our heads the rules of safe firearm handling, the barrel was off at like a 45-degree angle downrange. So Dad was here, and I don't have a lot of screen real estate here. Dad was here, barrel was this way, so it's all good.
But to act like it's some sort of mark of distinction or something like that, that's not the right way to do it.
Yeah, it's stupid. Every accidental discharge, every negligent discharge, you should consider as a black mark on your personal record.
Correct. Correct.
I mean, yeah, it means
Never
that you either have had a mechanical failure, which could still be your fault based on maintenance. That said, these are machines, and machines have failings, so it could just be a true accident, such as the shotgun incident that I referenced, or you had your finger in the wrong place, and if you're fortunate,
correct,
it's just property damage, and maybe you completely get away with it, maybe you end up with a misdemeanor, and worst case scenario, forget the felony, you have to live with the fact that you've killed somebody. So
yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, is negligent discharge can end up in somebody's death.
Yeah. Hey, Warsaw said he saw a very uplifting episode of Dr. Phil with a 15 or 16-year-old kid who murdered his mom with a sledgehammer. That's messed up. Thank you for that, Warsaw. I feel edified and uplifted now. How about you, Elias?
Well, that just turned into an interesting evening.
Let's get back to the outline here. So
yeah, let's move on.
This next story, I am going to go ahead and link this, and then this is some more of that investigative reporting that Elias did for us. So here is the link from AmmoLand News. You can see there, if you click the link, that there is a very official letter dated March 30th from the Rusk County Sheriff's Department and the Health Department. Mark 18, I bet that if the sledgehammer took Glock mags, it was from Fallout, and that's called a super sledge. Anyway, And the Rusk County Sheriff's Department was allegedly looking to prosecute any quote-unquote false statements or rumors about COVID-19. They said, please do not make comments regarding COVID-19 unless you were tested and have the results. So the rest of us can't do any research unless we've been tested for it. Now, you could be tested and be negative for it, and that makes you more educated than anybody else. Anyway, sorry, I'm reading the chat. Yeah. So anyway, this looks really terrible. It looks like we're just absolutely taking a dump on the First Amendment here. And once again, this is a situation where there's a possibility we didn't have the whole story. No question about it that this was an actual release that was made. So I do want to state that part of the story is true.
Yes, the link is to the Rusk County website. So it is a statement that is published on their website. Or something.
It has been removed from all of their social media. That said, there's been no statement rescinding that.
No. So here's where I was trying to figure out what's going on. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to make some phone calls and figure it out and do a little bit of research on this, because this just doesn't... First of all, it goes against federal guidelines, which says that if you've been around somebody who has it or believe they may have had it, if there's a good chance you've been exposed to it, you're supposed to quarantine and let other people know so that they can take proper measures. So I was like, something can't be right with this. So I did a little digging, and I actually called the sheriff's department, and I was transferred to his secretary and had to leave a voicemail, and I ended up emailing the sheriff, and hopefully I'll hear something back. But in the meantime, I also did a little bit more research on it, and one of the things I found was Rusk County has a local Facebook group that it's all about the COVID-19 to share information and stuff, and of course this was talked about on there, and several people on there were like, this just doesn't sound right. And they actually reached out to the co-chair of the GOP for that county. And he came back with, where was it? I actually quoted it to you earlier. And I want to bring that up. Let me find it real quick. Yeah, here's what he had told somebody there. The public health department put it out. It sounds like without the approval of the sheriff's department. It disappeared from all the social media. He was actually surprised that it was still findable on the county website, and that was definitely an overreach. That co-chair then commented himself in there saying that everything he has heard said that it was a unilateral thing done by the Department of Health and with no knowledge of the sheriff's department, and that he was trying to get some actual official words because he was being told that, that's what he was hearing, but he wanted something official. Now, somebody else in there said that they actually called the sheriff's department themselves, and they were referred to the health department. When they called the health department and they asked about it, the health department actually hung up on them, which to me definitely leaves some credibility to the idea that the health department was kind of doing their own thing. And the sheriff department actually had no intention. And one of the things that really set me to wondering about all this and kind of leaning towards definitely was fishy was when you go to the Facebook, like one of the posts, for instance, from the sheriff's department says straight out, we're not going to be pulling people over because you're out driving. Right. We can't do that. We don't have reasonable suspicion. So to me, it kind of felt like, okay, here is a sheriff's department where they have no intention of, using it as an excuse to, conduct Fourth Amendment violations or anything like that. So I found it really, really difficult. And, I'm really hoping to hear something back from the sheriff. I'm hoping he sends me an email and says, hey, yeah, you know what? I can't really talk about it. However, we did not publish that. And that's good enough for me. And then, whatever happens within the county to the health department who did that, that's on them. But yeah, well, hopefully it's not. So for you who have seen it, it may not be. It doesn't help that the sheriff's department hasn't put anything out and the county hasn't. But I used to work within the government. Used to be military, and I know that there are layers, and sometimes they need to investigate what happened before they can really say anything, and that may be what's happening. This all kind of unfolded within the last couple of days. So hopefully I'm going to keep an eye on it. I'm going to check again before next week because I really am curious to see, do they say anything about it. But from what I can tell, yeah, the sheriff has no intention of doing anything about it.
And I do think it's important for, especially, a sheriff's an elected official. Now, I firmly believe that the commanding levels of all law enforcement should be elected positions.
Yes.
You know, and we'll probably talk about that here in just a few minutes. But I think it's important for the sheriff to make a statement of some sort. Unfortunately, it's probably going to require him, if not a specific person, then throwing the entire health department under the bus. But in this instance, I think that for visibility's sake, that's important. Because his name was put on this. And so he's, in my mind, if not legally, at least socially, he's culpable for this. And so I think it's super important for him.
It's one of those, the buck stops here. Something happened, and the problem is where it happened. You know, it happens within companies, it happens within government, that when there is something, you know, when you're in a certain position, there's a lot of times your signature is going to get put on things. Whether they're just public announcements, the sheriff may not even have approved them himself necessarily, but as the sheriff, his name goes on it. So it's very possible that, you know, it's sitting in a file somewhere and somebody sniped it. Either somebody maybe from the sheriff's department thought, okay, yeah, that's fine, whatever, and didn't understand what was being put in it, or somebody from the health department just went and opened up the file and you know, used it without actually telling the sheriff's department, because that's what it sounds like. The sheriff's department didn't even know this was happening. So, you know, it's one of those things where hopefully it brings to light some policy changes and they kind of change some procedures. But I do agree that something has to be said from him, or at least the department, you know, whoever is the press secretary, to say, hey, you know, here's what happened. You know, spin it however they have to, but at least say it, so to put people at ease.
And there is some discussion to be had here, because clamping down on First Amendment, on free speech is, well, we've talked before on the channel on these Wednesday night things, things like hate speech. That's garbage. Okay, I do have the right to say whatever I want to say. You have the right to not hear what you don't want to hear. I'll agree with that. That means that you walk away, you turn off the stream. Please don't turn off the stream. But all
the numbers just went down.
Or in the extreme situation, you dot somebody in the eye. Now, I'm not saying that a physical response to a verbal attack is the best solution, but I understand sometimes that's where things end up. Okay, that is kind of a self-regulating society. You know, and there are people who are going to label me an anarchist for that, and that's fine. You're not the first person to call me an anarchist, so hi. That said, though, there are some situations, not to the extent of, you can't say, you know, everybody has the right to be wrong. That's just, that's Facebook in a nutshell. Yeah, Facebook in a nutshell. Now, the flip side, though, for any of you who are wondering, especially if you live in the state of Indiana and you just can't understand why the stay-at-home order got extended by 2 weeks, well, let's go back in time to Monday, April 6th. It was a very nice day in this part of the country. And across the street from my house, there is a park. And I swear that I saw half of the children that I know who live in this community at the park on Monday, at the playground, on the high contact surfaces, on the basketball court. I in no way felt like this is an overreach or felt like this is uncalled for Tuesday morning when I looked out the window to see the Parks Department supervisor putting up plywood signs spray painted "Park Closed" and stringing out caution tape.
Right.
Because.
Right, and that wouldn't be an overreach. It's enforcing a lawful order.
This is a slippery slope and a dangerous thing to say. Sometimes people don't understand until there's some force put behind something. Now, that really feels like a great segue to our final topic tonight, don't you think? Because that could be taken way too far, and even though we are an hour into the stream, now I think that we're getting to what both Elias and I considered kind of the intended meat and potatoes of the night.
Yeah. This is one of the things that kind of came up in just discussions this week. Actually started, I think, a big part of it started from something my wife was working on, and it had to do with video she had to watch of the militarization of police. And you and I got to talking, and we were talking about the different things going on, and it kind of went from there. Oh, you were talking about that no-knock raid. And so it all kind of came together.
Let me start with, if you're following the channel on social media, number one, thank you. Number two, you saw earlier that I shared a link for a video, kind of homework for you guys, give you some background into tonight's discussion. And from that video, there was a book authored, and I said in my social media post that I think it's going to be one of my next reads. And I did not give any further commentary on that. I have not vetted these authors. For all I know, the little bit of truth contained in that one video that I linked is the only truth to be had in the entire book and in the entire concept. I don't know. I do think, and I've said this before, it is dangerous to stick our heads into an echo chamber. So even if I put down the book and say, I don't agree with most of what I just read, I won't necessarily regret having read it, if that makes sense to you guys. So I do apologize for not putting any kind of disclaimer to that. Poor Conservative, if he's still on, he did make mention that he is familiar with one of the authors, and that they are very left-leaning. But that doesn't necessarily mean full left and statism.
It also doesn't mean that they're necessarily wrong. You may not agree with everything they say, but it doesn't mean that they don't have anything that they don't agree with.
Even a blind sow finds an acorn occasionally. So anyway, and what the video subject was about is the militarization of the United States police as a whole. The book is titled "Tyranny Comes Home," and it's what it's supposed to be. Again, I haven't read this book. It's a look at the effect of the militaristic mindset of America as far as a globalist policy and how that's affecting what happens here in the United States.
And we can go all the way back to the 1700s and see that concern there. James Madison wrote about the fact that, in his opinion, he wrote, of all the enemies of the public liberty, war is perhaps the most be dreaded because it comprises and develops the germ of every other. And he kind of goes into this thing of all these effects that can happen, which is what they're doing with the book. And at the very end of that quote, it goes, no nation could preserve its freedom in the midst of continual warfare. And that's kind of, from my understanding, what that book is going off of, is you get this mindset of a war and then you bring it home. And now it continues here. So now where we were fighting a war over on the streets of Iraq, now we are acting as if we're fighting a war on the streets
Right,
of
and
New York City or Indianapolis or Chicago or even smaller places, like South Bend, Indiana or Cleveland, and that's not a good
right,
mindset
and you've
to
got to
have.
think that for a lot of, and I won't necessarily say a lot of my viewers, but some of my early viewers who are younger supporters of the channel, they were born after 9/11. They have not known
Yep.
a time of true United States peace, which is to say that we haven't had peaceful times and overall a few low points notwithstanding, a pretty bountiful lifestyle here in the United States. But since the really with only a very small break in the 90s, even for the vast majority of my life, you can go back into the 80s and you've got conflict. I mean,
yes,
but definitely since 2001, when President Bush declared a war on terror, or the global war on terror, we have continuously had an active fighting force deployed in multiple points around the globe. Warsaw Patriot heading out. Good night. Thanks for joining us, bud. Thanks for the commentary you provided, and I was kind of yanking your chain there with the sledgehammer stuff. It's absolutely a good counterpoint. It's disturbing, but not because you brought it up, but because that kind of darkness exists in the hearts of our fellow man. So
exactly, that mindset is here anyway. I just found a really quick number. Since the United States was born, only 21 years of peace.
That's interesting. What's your source on that?
Pulling it up.
And I don't doubt that, but it's kind of so like.
And the thing is, you got to remember is we've had declared wars and we've had undeclared conflicts or
Vietnam?
Police actions. And so when you take all those in,
oh, absolutely. And what's sad is that means that for over 90% of our nation's history, we've had some sort of militaristic conflict going on. So, anyway, kind of what as you guys know, our subjects on a week-by-week basis are by and large gleaned from the headlines since the previous week. Now, there's some, callbacks and things like that. But of course, that means that there has been a recent story surface that precipitated this being in our stream this week. And the particular incident that we are looking at occurred in Atlanta in Louisville, Kentucky, on March 13th. And so let me drop a link there again, link in the chat for you guys if you want to do any of your own reading. And let's back up. Let's go clear back in time to, I think, the very first Tactical Review live stream. And I read a fictional account highlighting the dangers of red flag laws. Now, this particular situation in this news story did not occur due to an extreme risk protection order. It was, in fact, a screwed up no-knock warrant being served by the Louisville Metro Police Department. They were going out on a no-knock raid to execute a drug search warrant. They went to the wrong residence and kicked in the door, and the man of the house, the boyfriend of the deceased, we'll go ahead and just put that out there, that this went as bad as possible. He did exactly what I would hope that I would do if all of a sudden my doors are kicked in and I see armed men in my house. He grabbed for his firearm and he opened fire. In the process, again, not knowing that this was law enforcement, and I'm going to use that term very loosely because in this case, they were breaking and entering. They went to the wrong house. They did not identify themselves. They were breaking and entering. This was an armed breaking and entering. I'm very thankful that in the state of Indiana, that's exactly how this would be viewed too. And anyway, so this man opened fire. Of course, the police, upon being fired upon, returned fire, and his girlfriend, who was, completely in the nude, died in a hail of gunfire. Brastard says a no-knock warrant is the same as any other home invasion, and I don't disagree with that.
Oh, I agree.
So,
I agree.
But
yeah.
this one gets even worse. I'll go ahead and let you kind of. Sounded like you were getting ready to say something. So.
Oh no, I was just gonna agree. I mean, no-knock warrants should never happen, and you know, the really sad part of it too is no-knock warrants. The vast majority of them are approved. What the judges just let them do whatever they want to. The vast majority of them have nothing to do with any kind of violent offender. One might think no-knock warrants being used to go get somebody who's a mass murderer or serial killer or somebody very violent. But no, most of them are actually search warrants for drugs. Oftentimes, something as simple as marijuana. No matter what your views are on marijuana or drugs in general, I think we can all agree that it doesn't require a no-knock raid at 2 o'clock in the morning. The numbers of no-knock raids have dramatically risen. I found some numbers yesterday or this morning or somewhere where in 1981 there was something like, I think, 3,000 no-knock raids for the entire year. And in 2005 it was 50,000 no-knock raids. You talk about the person who just died from it. I mean, you've got kids that were being killed from this. There was a 7-year-old in Detroit that she was shot and killed while sleeping on the couch. There was one where it was a flashbang was thrown into a baby's crib. The baby had to be put into a medically induced coma because of how bad the burns are. I mean, this is, and most of the time the cops are completely scot-free. They have no liability. There's a couple places where that's changed. Texas is a big one. Texas has been one where they have showed that they are liable, and there's a couple others. If we have time, we'll go into it, and if not, then I'll just talk about it on my show instead.
So here's the thing, though. Okay, Elias and I, again, as you guys have ascertained, we do a lot of communicating before, after the show, sidebars during the show. That may or may not happen. And I told Elias, I said, is it so? There was an officer injured. Apparently, he took a shot to the leg, and that's all I know for sure. I asked Elias, I said, is it wrong of me that my only fault on this boyfriend who did the shooting is the fact that there wasn't a body on the receiving end? And okay, if I have any law enforcement friends listening, that sounds really callous. Well, here's the thing. Once again, a group of armed men come in my home. I train for center mass or pelvic girdle shots. They are high percentage shots that are going to stop the attack on my life. And Elias, you made a good point too. The other thing this is doing is, because if we do not hold the police liable for things like this is training criminals to just break in and yell police.
Oh yeah, because exactly. Yeah, it's training that they can do this, and if we are being trained, which, mark my words, we're being trained to accept that it might be the cops, so don't shoot because it might be them. Something like a flashbang is not really hard to recreate. We won't go into it, obviously, but it's not really that hard to create. I'm sure there's some creative people out there that can figure out how to make a homemade flashbang very, very easily. that wouldn't actually do any damage. But since most people don't know what a flashbang actually looks like or sounds like, it would be very easy to make a very miniature one that can confuse homeowners. And now they think, okay, well, it might be the cops who put my gun down because I'm going to go to jail even though I know I didn't do anything wrong. Which is, you know, as Mark AT is pointing out, how many times wrong the police get it. New York commissioner estimated that 10% of no-knock raids were the wrong house, because there is no punishment, there's no consequences. In some states, the courts have ruled, nope, there's no liability on the cops. Now in Indiana, that's different. Due to the fact of these things happening a lot, the Indiana legislature passed a law that said that if you go into a house and it's the wrong address because you didn't do your due diligence, and the homeowner shoots you, the homeowner is not liable. They're going to treat it as a home invasion, period. Because you didn't have a warrant to go in. Yeah, because you did not have a warrant to go into that house. Right. Therefore, it is a home invasion. So
yeah. I had something I was going to say. Oh, you were talking about flashbangs. It's not I wouldn't say it's an official flashbang, but it would do the job. I need 2 items, neither of which are regulated in any way. I'm not going to.
Exactly.
I'm not going to tell you guys what those are, but.
And that's why. Yeah. That's what I said. I mean, even a good imagination, somebody can come up with it. I mean, it would not be difficult.
And it's not the only way to do it. Heck, man, an MRE heater in a water bottle would make a pretty effective. It wouldn't flash much, but it would be disruptive. Anyway, of course, this guy's girlfriend is dead, and this is absolutely an ongoing thing. So I don't mean to sound callous, but I have friends in law enforcement, and if any of my friends in law enforcement catch this stream, I want you guys to know I have family in law enforcement. I hold you guys to a higher standard than that. That's all there is to it.
There's a difference between there's a difference between a law enforcement officer and the system. And it is my belief the system Gestapo. Is broken.
So, anyway,
yes.
Here's the thing. We've talked about this before. This is a government, allegedly, of the people, for the people, and by the people. We have a citizen soldier program. Our military is of the people.
Mm-hmm.
Our law enforcement are of the people. This stuff where they get special passes and stuff, that bothers me.
And that's
and we're gonna have to come back around to that. So all that to say is, if I, as a regular citizen, would be liable for X, Y, or Z, then every law enforcement officer in America needs to be liable for X, Y, and Z.
Yes.
Just like I am responsible for every round that leaves my firearm. If I'm at the range and I have too much of an angle on my shot and it clears the berm, and I'm firing a 30-06 or a 50 BMG and it travels 3/4 of a mile and domes somebody on a farm, I'm liable for murder. Well, police officers, they're citizen police officers, and as a matter of fact, allegedly, they are highly trained individuals. They should be held to an even higher standard. I know.
Oh, that's we'll have to talk about that.
We have talked about that a little bit. So.
But that's part of the problem, and they're not even being held to They want to pretend that they're the military, but they're not even being held to military standards. It's easier for a cop to shoot somebody in America than it was for a soldier to engage in enemy combat.
We're going to come back to that because real quick.
I mean, it really, really was, and that's a problem. We're within our country. There's not a war here. We're not in a war. There's no reason for the police to act as if they are against everybody. And that's what's really happening. And I think we need not just the liability, but I think that the states need to adopt more of the Indiana stance, where when somebody shoots a police officer who's invaded their house and it's the wrong address, not only is it that the cops are liable for anything they do, right now they can go in there and smash up the entire house and leave, and that's
Right.
it. You're just out of luck. But also the people themselves can't be held liable
Right.
when they're defending
So,
their house.
in the situation, though, in Louisville, the judge released this individual, Mr. Walker, who was the fellow who opened fire on the invaders. He was released into house arrest. Keep in mind that he is trying to pick up the pieces of his life and deal with the fact that his girlfriend was murdered by the cops, by the way. Well, I believe it was Arsenal 616. Ironically, I get a lot of my news from some of the meme pages that I follow, but it was either that or We Are MOA, or there's a few of them. I'll tell you what, if you guys want some good follows, you can click my following on Instagram and see who I'm following, and most of those guys are top notch. They're good for a laugh and occasionally some really good reporting. So this was the Louisville Fraternal Order of Police's response. I have blown that up, so I do apologize for the image quality. I'm just going to leave this up there and let you guys bask in the glory of that. I shared this with Elias earlier, and keeping in mind that, yes, we have an injured police officer. However, we have no dead police officers, but we do have a dead civilian. And this was the FOP's response to this. I think in Spanish, the proper pronunciation for what this is merde de toro. It's just a nice heaping, steaming divot is what that is. It's absolutely garbage. Absolutely garbage.
Yeah. He the guy in question is not a threat at all to the men and women of law enforcement. I'd actually say it's probably the opposite. Law enforcement has become a threat to the man. This is complete. He said BS.
And one more situation. Now, this one I don't have as much information about. We do not have the official story on this yet. We don't even, the couple of semi-official police responses that I have seen so far have been contradictory. But do I have a date on this? This was last month. Copy date on this is March 13th. It was very shortly before this. And you maybe have seen the hashtag, his name was Duncan Limp. There was a no-knock warrant served on his home. He was allegedly an imminent threat to law enforcement or the public, and initial impressions are that he was shot in the head from a round originating outside his home. That, my friends, is an assassination. That's not self-defense. That is an assassination. There have been alleged drug charges. My understanding is that he was actually Limp was a computer programmer who was attempting to build a decentralized kind of like a forum for 3%ers or militia or modern day Minutemen, patriots, whatever any of us want to call ourselves. He was working on a platform for those of us who would consider ourselves in that vein, to be able to communicate in the event that all of the major platforms decide that we are a danger to society. Spoiler alert, how many videos have we seen taken down from gun channels in the last 2 weeks? I mean, there's a reason. I keep telling you guys, down in the description text, follow me on social media, because you never know that one day all of us gun channels may be kicked off of YouTube. Follow me on BitChute. Follow me on GunStreamer. The difference is, right now, neither of those platforms have any capacity to do what we're doing here tonight. They don't have live stream capacity. As soon as BitChute gets it, I'm going to be figuring out what it's going to take to multicast, and I'm going to, until I'm kicked off of YouTube, I'm still going to focus on YouTube, but I'm absolutely going to make sure that I'm doing everything I can to not be completely reliant on YouTube, because I don't trust them to not deplatform me.
Right. Yeah.
So Mark 18 says what the guy was building sounds like a database for the feds. And that's always, we've seen those memes go around, like when you meet up with your 3%er group to go on the raid, and it's ATF guys. There's a reason that every time I've told you guys to find a group of like-minded patriots, I've mentioned a local group of like-minded patriots. There's nothing wrong with platforms such as this, where but you guys are trusting that at face value, I am who I say I am. I'm not saying that you guys need to be trusting me with where your rally point is and what your inventory looks like. You don't know me.
Right.
All right? You've got my word that I'm being genuine. Now, Elias and I, we know each other from other platforms. We've met up in person. We're trying to get together again, go to the range. That's a little bit of a different situation. But for those of you guys in the live chat, most of you guys, for all you know, I'm not genuine at all, and I'm an ATF plant, and I'm wanting all of your pictures of your illegal SBRs.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it becomes, OPSEC. That's one of the key things whenever you're dealing with this kind of thing.
Practice
know
safe
who
sex.
You're dealing with. Don't trust somebody that you don't know.
So anyway, so that's kind of where we are on these no-knock raids. I really wish I could say that I had been proven wrong in what I said all of those 5 months ago. Randall Hill lost all of his firearms in a boating accident. I respect that. I've got to say that we firearms owners seem like we are we're terrible at
We're
boating.
not very good boaters.
And we all live in
boating.
floodplains. It's crazy.
Ugh. All my rounds.
Anyway,
everything.
I wish I could say that society was proving me wrong, and that in fact these red flag laws are exactly what they claim to be, and that they make the world a safer place. And no, innocent people are dying, which gets us to the point of the militarization of the American police officer. And this goes back to the 70s. Does that sound right?
Yeah, it started around the 60s or the 70s with the riots, the race riots in LA. That's where you start seeing SWAT. It's towards the end of the 60s. And, this is an area where, and this is the reason I said I'm probably going to end up talking about it on my show, because of the fact that this is something that is really important to me. The fact that we've militarized our police. Like I said, it started back then with the SWAT, and it has just grown. One of the big key things was in the 90s, they pushed it over the edge, was in the 90s, In California, there was a bank robbery where the bank robbers were much better armed than the police. And that's really what pushed. Now you're talking about armored vehicles, and you're talking about cops are driving around on patrols with AR-15s, which we're told are military weapons.
Right.
So
right.
Let's remember that. We were being told these are military weapons. Why do the police need military weapons? If that's what you're going to classify them, we'll play that game. But then why do they have it? A police force does not need that. Those are, we're told, weapons for war. So why do police, who are supposed to supposedly protect and serve the community, driving around with those?
Right. So, yeah, that's one of those things that I just failed at an emoji. Sorry. I thought I was in the search box. I was not in the search box. Anyway, that's one of those things, though, that I'm going to say I don't have a problem with regular patrol cops having body armor. Now, we're being told that civilians don't need body armor. I absolutely have body armor. As a matter of fact, look, I'm referencing the social media again, but if you're following me, I've been sharing my quarantine workouts so I don't, gain a quarantine while I'm stuck at home, more or less. And a lot of those involve throwing the plate carrier on. It's a bonus. It's a bonus 20 pounds of resistance, and it also falls under train like you fight. Because believe me, 20 pounds doesn't sound like a lot. Every time I've gone on a run wearing that plate carrier, I spend the rest of the week feeling like I did 8,000 shrugs. And if you're not training for that, you're not ready for that when it comes time to do it.
Right.
I don't have a problem, per se, with patrol officers having an AR-15 or even possibly an M4. Here's the caveat. I don't think that we as normal civilians should have any extra hurdles to clear than what they have to put those in their patrol car.
Absolutely. And again, it goes back to that militarization. When police started being convinced that they used to have the thing of the thin blue line. They stand between good and bad. The thin blue line has become more of we're surrounded by bad.
Right.
And we can't trust anybody, so we're just going to assume everybody is a criminal. And that is a wannabe military mindset.
Right.
One of the things that really, really irks me is the fact that they refer to non-police as civilians. It was actually kind of ironic. While I was still in the military, I actually went on a police ride-along. Just on my own. I wanted to see what it was like, and I went on a ride-along. It was in Las Vegas, and when the officer is calling in the start of his shift over the radio, he identifies that he has one civilian, and I started laughing. Like, hang on a second, I'm the one that's in the military, you're the civilian.
Right.
That's a big problem when you start looking at it as us against them, and that's really where this whole thing is us versus them, and that is not the mindset that police officers should be having. Fine, have an AR-15. Why? Because they're civilians. And to any police who are friends of yours, I'm not saying that to offend you. That's the way it was supposed to be.
Oh, absolutely.
You are civilians. Absolutely. You are officers of the state to help maintain peace and order, but you're civilians. You're not military. And one of the biggest disservices to police also is the fact that they're not trained correctly. Which makes it even rougher. There was somebody who had done a study that says, when really the SWAT teams end up against somebody who knows what they're doing, the SWAT teams end up dead.
Oftentimes,
because they don't know the proper way. So when military go in, and I'm not infantry, so anybody who's infantry can correct me, but it's my understanding, when you go into a house or you go into a building in a war zone, you assume you're going to probably have to kill everybody inside. Right. And so you go in with that mentality. Well, That's not the mentality we want our officers to have. We don't want the cops. They talk about the fact that they throw in a flashbang into a house, and then they start yelling orders. Anybody who's ever had a flashbang knows what it does to you. It disorients you horribly. Mm-hmm. You can't hear, you can't see, you have no idea what's going on, and so then you can't comply because they don't have any idea of what's going on, and they end up dead.
Right. Well, Braster just made a really good point, and Little Cup of Joe just joined us. Joe is a personal friend of mine, served in the Marine Corps. Appreciate your service, man. And he also discussed the fact, and we were just talking about that law enforcement have more firepower than regular civilians. But Braster pointed out cops are not civilians. They have extra rights that soldiers and regular citizens don't have. So let's go back and let's talk about something we touched on when we talked about the no-knock raids. And you and I spoke about it again today while we were prepping for the show. We're going to go back to me having read both of Nick Irving's, that's Nick the Reaper Irving, both of his autobiographical books. I've mentioned them on previous shows. If you guys haven't read those, I highly recommend those. His fiction books are good. I'm looking forward to the to Drone Strike coming out. But honestly, if I had to pick between, we've got to get rid of either his fiction stuff or his nonfiction stuff. We're getting rid of the fiction because his nonfiction is amazing. And one thing he talked about as a direct action sniper, even in the Army Rangers, so these are full-on operators here. He talked about when they'd go back for the debriefing and the forensics team was in there confirming clean kills, and how nerve-wracking that was, because he would be, his career in the military would have been over, and he would have been facing legal action on the international level for killing a civilian if he did not have good kills. And yet we have so many places in the United States where the police don't have, or practically don't have. On paper, maybe they're supposed to be liable, but in practicality, we have situations like what happened in Louisville, where we don't know what the outcome of that's going to be yet, but the Fraternal Order of Police is already whining about a man who fired on armed home invaders being released to house arrest because those armed home invaders happen to be police officers. And that's garbage.
Yep. Totally agree.
Older full autos just so cops can collect. Well, here's the thing, Braster. The cops don't even have to go with the pre-ban stuff. Police can get, if a police department wants G36s, they can get them. The rest of us have to go with a Tommy-built T36 because it's not allowed to import a G36 because it was only made as a full auto weapon. But if a police department wants HK G36s and they've got the money for it, then they get them.
Oh, they don't even need the money for it.
Right.
Just tell the feds they want it, and trust me, it'll end up in their hands. Which is fine, as long as it ends up in my hands also.
Yeah, there's no reason that a full auto M16 lower or an actual select fire lower should be $30,000. Legitimately, the parts are out there that I could build one for. I could build that lower because, of course, I need a full auto cut lower, which is wider in the rear pocket and has a low shelf. Those lowers cost like $180 from Centurion Arms, I think. Maybe it's only $150. And the lower parts kit with the auto sear is like $100 instead of $50. There's no reason that there should be a $30,000 investment, but this is the law of supply and demand. And you want to talk about price gouging, there it is. Mark 18 saying that the shooting of dogs came from Afghanistan. I can believe that. And see, that's another really good point. Once upon a time, I've told you guys this, I had looked into joining the Chattanooga Police Department when I lived in Tennessee. And, do with that what you will. If like half the stream quits out now, that's fine too. One of the things, they preferentially hire, police departments preferentially hire former military. Now, from a discipline standpoint, I could maybe see where that would come from. But the problem is, once again, we have had 20 years of continuous warfare. That means that somebody at this point with previous military experience has a very high likelihood of that previous experience, including combat duty. And a very high likelihood of that being active combat duty, not just in a conflict zone, but actually having gone in, cleared structures with the teams, engaged combatants, all of the things that we don't want on our streets.
Right. I'm former military. And so this is not meant to, obviously disparage any veterans, including combat veterans. But I don't believe that a soldier who is freshly coming out of that kind of mentality and that kind of environment should not be a police officer. I think they need to take some time. They need to reintegrate into society. They need to get themselves stabilized and into a point where they can learn how to be police without the military training be what is at the forefront. Because being a police officer is not the same as being a military, and we have got to stop allowing that mentality to exist, because it's not the same. When a cop is walking his beat or driving his, nowadays or whatever, I don't want the cop driving around to sit there and analyze me, ask, am I a threat? Is this person a threat? Are my kids a threat? That's not a good way
no more
for a
or
cop
less
to be.
Than each of us as responsibly armed citizens. Because I do. Correct. I analyze when I see somebody, is this person a threat? I mean, we've got to do that. And I see what you're saying, but there's people who would take that to the extreme.
Right, but there is a difference. There is a difference, exactly. And when you've been in a combat situation, you do. That's where we get the whole PTSD and that kind of thing. We do have that because when you've been in that thing of, at any second you're likely to be shot in a war zone or shot at or attacked in some way, the likeliness of it here, while we all should be kind of aware of our surroundings, the likeliness of our being attacked here is ridiculously lower than in a combat zone. And I don't want cops who have just come from combat zones. They just shouldn't be there. It takes time, and they need to be thoroughly psychologically evaluated to make sure that they can. But again, our government has been pushing this militarization. So from a government standpoint, this is exactly what they wanted.
I have a friend who is a former student, and she is actually going through criminal justice classes right now in college, and her intention is to go into law enforcement. Now, one thing I really like is she selectively uses the term peacekeeping officer, which is exactly what our police force is supposed to be, which isn't to say that violence won't occur, but the objective is to keep the peace, to de-escalate, not to escalate.
Correct.
So anyway,
correct.
We had an opportunity to converse. I was really hoping that she would be able to be here and be in the chat, and because once again, I want all sides of the conversation. So, and so I told her that we were going to be talking about militarization of the American police force, and she asked, out of curiosity, are you for or against? And part of that because she knows my proclivity for firearms, and I mean, again, I grew up on the 80s action movies, and if money were no object, I'd probably have like an M60 and, you know, several thousand rounds of 7.62 linked up, and et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, my response was against. And this is going to be the part, some of you guys aren't going to like this. I am pro law enforcement, and by that I mean I am pro peacekeeper. I am anti Gestapo. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the perfect way to describe these militarized police force, where every officer is, you know, going around wearing basically military fatigues and part of it. Now, don't get me wrong. A good set of reinforced cargo pants are comfortable and they're utilitarian, but there's that physical stance. Look, my dad used to be a bouncer at one of the local bars. And he said, he told me growing up, he's like, you know, the nights that I went in wearing like a polo shirt and khakis, I had fewer problems than the nights that I went in wearing like a cut-off t-shirt or a tank top and shorts. Yep. And because the whole thing, let's face it, you get one chance to make a first impression. So anyway, and so I continued on. I said, combat tactics very rarely have a place on our streets and should be reactive in nature, not proactive. And the news stories that we led this segment off with are perfect examples of that. Proactive combat strategies end up with flashbangs in babies' cribs.
Yep.
They end up, they are these no-knock warrants. Those are full-on proactive combat tactics. Reactive would be, oh wow, look, these bank robbers have fully automatic weapons, they're killing people. Well, yeah, break out the snipers, match force for force in that situation.
Here's going to be my argument, but it shouldn't be the cops.
Okay.
That's what you have National Guard for. That was the intention of things like that, of militias. That was the intention of militias, was that when something like that happened, you bring in militias. I guarantee you throw a militia at a group of bank robbers that are threatening innocent lives, and you're going to have some people who will join in and make sure that the threat's neutralized.
Kind of like when the Hells Angels ended up truly riding shotgun. I mean, yeah. So...
Yeah. You know, police officers, like you said, you know, when you talk about the clothing, look in the last 20 years how they've changed clothing. They went from wearing slacks, button-up shirt, and ties to, like you said, wearing fatigues, to the point of some of them wearing camo. That's not needed. They were meant to be more professional, as Bresser just pointed out, you know, or I'm sorry, as Mark who pointed out, the fact that they went from being peace officers to law enforcers. That, you know, is another one of those really subtle changes, but when you bring it all together, it definitely creates a sense of us.
So yeah, our conversation went on. I said, and I've said it already tonight. For example, I have no issues with body armors. I have no issues with a full-on select fire M4, as long as, again, with the caveat that we as regular people should be able to own those. But for what reason does any police department need a Bradley fighting vehicle? Why do they need an APC? Why do they need MRAPs? An MRAP is a troop transport where you expect to come across IEDs. Okay, I can see it in Chicago, I guess. Right, and Little Cup of Joe. Torn between don't tell me how to live my life and wanting to own automatic weapons and whatever else, and also never wanting to see a police LAV roll up and have to level a house to kill a psycho with a machine gun. But do you? All right, how many houses have had to be leveled? And I'm not saying the number is 0. How many houses have had to be leveled in Afghanistan or Iraq because there are psychos in there with machine guns? But usually it's those psychos who are leveling the house. Now, that goes back to...
Oh, no. Trust me. The U.S. has leveled houses. Why? Because it's easier. But again, this is war.
Right.
And that's what war entails. Is, you know what's the easiest way? We do it in the easiest way that, reduces the chances for casualties on our side. Sometimes that means dropping a bomb on a house and, whoever's in it's in it.
Here's the thing. With the exception of the 20s, the 1920s, not the 2020s, which we're making a good go at all the worst parts of the 1920s. With the exception of the roaring 20s, and all of this brought on by yet another prohibition of individual liberties, when automatic weapons were readily available to the populace, by and large they weren't a huge problem. Were there isolated incidences where they were in fact a huge problem? Yes. But by and large, they were not. Back when you could order a firearm from Sears and Roebuck and have it sent straight to your house with no government intervention, by and large, we had lower violent crime rates. So,
right.
And the thing is that there's nothing making fully automatic weapons illegal in the United States. You do have to pay the crown for the privilege. They do have to be a certain vintage. But are you less dead if you're hit with 3 rounds out of an M4 than if you're hit with 3 rounds out of a Vietnam era M16? I mean, dead is dead. So, Yankee Marshall points all this out. Used to be a cop and was an intel guy in the military. Law enforcement's totally different now, like an us versus them war mentality. Hey, exactly. And you know what? Let me just keep scrolling through this conversation because there was a lot of good stuff. I was really hoping that she would be able to make it in here, and maybe she'll end up chiming in.
See, and I don't think we're going to have war on the streets. I just don't. I think even if we had the different weapons out there, certain pockets of the country, sure. But you're going to have that war on the streets anyway. You're going to have gang wars in LA. You're going to have gang wars in Chicago,
and
because that's just the reality.
There's nothing preventing that now. There really isn't.
Correct.
Like I said, with about a $350 lower now, unless I, do everything I can to anonymize myself, the ATF's probably going to intercept those packages that I would need to do so. But legitimately, with the 3D printer, I can 3D print a lightning link and convert any AR-15 to full auto. Now, it's not select fire, it's full auto only. Mm-hmm. With a coat hanger, I could do that. And we have a really classy shirt talking about that on the Teespring store, but that's neither here nor there. Anyway, shameless plug. There's nothing preventing that right now. And the thing is that the only people who allow that to be prevented are the ones who don't want to get a stupid felony. The ones who are already intending to commit murder, do they really care whether or not the weapon they're using to do so is illegal?
Right.
Anyway, so continuing on with the conversation, her response was she likes the reactive, not proactive comment. She said, I fully support SWAT, but not every patrol officer needs the things they have. Now, and that's where we're going to have some contention here, because what you're saying is instead of having a militia within the police department, the well-regulated militia of the United States needs to be who steps in there. Or the more officially sanctioned militia of the National Guard. And then my response was, and SWAT doesn't need rolled as often as they are in many places. On call, listening on comms, ready to go? Sure. If we're going to resort to using SWAT instead of the National Guard. Her response was, in her opinion, the places that SWAT is called too often, they have a weak department. If the patrolmen feel like they need SWAT to come in and save the day with their fancy armor and weapons, then you have a weak department who's not willing to do what it takes to do the job. And then I made a counterpoint to that. Or you have a department that has bought fully into the us versus them mentality against civilians, and so misunderstand what the job even is. And that's why I don't feel that there is no hypocrisy here in me saying I support my local sheriff's department, who is my local peacekeeping organization. And I am more than willing to make a video like this. Number one, once again, the sheriff's department is headed by an elected official. And number two, I know the guys on my local sheriff's department. They're all constitutional in nature. They all support my right, your right, our right to keep and bear arms. And they understand that an armed citizenry makes their job easier. Anyway, and we weren't able to get a lot more in because I felt the need to go torment myself with a 5+ mile run. And so that's it. And so we have somebody who is currently working in corrections who intends to go into peacekeeping or law enforcement or whatever you want to call it, and by and large absolutely agrees with the position that we take here tonight.
And I think you'll find a lot of them do. I think you have several different categories. I think most people that go into being a police officer do it with honorable intentions. And I think that while they're in, the propaganda works on them, and then especially the ones who are in kind of the tougher areas like Chicago, LA, New York, they see a darker side, which makes them even more susceptible to getting that mentality. And then I'm sure you have some that never get that mentality at all.
There's so much irony in this. Number one, the places that you would think, how do I want to phrase this? So the groups that you would think would want less status law enforcement are the ones who want to enact policies that require more. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Now, I'm going to go on record here and say the far left, this is my left, I know it's backwards on the screen, and the far right both want what we have and more of it. Because, and that's why I really, really try to say, instead of the left, I try to say statists, because we have statists on both sides of the aisle. I will maintain that until one of them Epsteins me. And they want this consolidation of power into the state. They want a Gestapo. Legitimately, they'll call it something else, but that's exactly what they want. Where the police are a special group and they disappear regular people and there's no liability for it. There's, and then, but on both the left and the right side, in a more centrist view on this, we want less government oversight and don't necessarily have a problem with people who have a shield or a badge, but they need to understand that they are civilians who happen to have the authority vested in them by their fellow civilians to do things like arrest people who are not doing the things that we all agree are part of a productive society. You know, if your pursuit of happiness is going out and taking other people's right to life, well then yeah, somebody who has authority or a posse of regular old Americans need to just put a rope around your neck and rack you up the nearest tree. Unfortunately, though, there's no due process there. And that's why I think that there is a place for a civilian police force that is answerable to the population as a whole.
And even we go back to the 1800s, I think it was. I know I was older than that, I'm sure. The police force in England, they were purposely designed in a different way to make sure people didn't think they were military. The military at the time wore red, so the police wore blue or black. On purpose to get them away from that mentality of, you're not military. You're here to help keep the peace. If anybody's acting stupid, you handle it. But that they were not military. And now we are going backwards. And that's what we based ours initially on. Our police force came from what they were doing in England.
Well, and even in England, they've had to do so because, once again, as they try more and more to disarm the citizens because violence is increasing, they're finding that the criminals don't give a crap, and they will do whatever they have to be violent.
And that's always been the problem. And that's always been the problem, is that the criminals are always going to get a hold of whatever they want. It does not matter how illegal you make it, they'll get a hold of whatever it is they want. Just look at the war between the IRA and the British the entire time, and they've always been able to get what they want.
Look, it may not be the most reliable, it may not be the most ergonomic, it may not be the prettiest, but unless you outlaw hardware stores, you cannot outlaw firearms. Because some dude's going to go out in his garage and knock one together.
Criminals find a way.
Look, man, all you have to do is go out to one of the 8,000 cow pastures in Indiana. There's more than that, I'm sure. With a shovel, and then go buy some diesel fuel. And if you have the know-how, you can start just erasing whole blocks from towns and cities. I'm not recommending you do that. This stream has now been flagged. I'm on another watch list. But that's my point is that bad people find a way. And the problem is I'm preaching to the choir here. I saw Joe said something about suppressors. And yeah, the fact that the Safe Hearing Act didn't go through, I'm going to put on the tinfoil hat a little bit here, and I'm going to say the Virginia Beach shooting, where the guy had one suppressed 1911 and one unsuppressed, that was absolutely a statist organized situation. It's just way too convenient when the deregulation of suppressors was making so much headway for there to have been a shooting when the only crimes committed involving suppressors were the illegal manufacture thereof for decades. And the irony of, Joe, of you saying that the tax is way too much, and I don't disagree, but I'm going to say that the tax actually hasn't changed. And when you run that all the way back to 1934, I put $200 into an inflation calculator, and I think that if that tax had followed inflation, that the per stamp cost today would be something like $7,800. It was absolutely meant to be prohibitively expensive. It was meant to be a backdoor ban on suppressors, on fully automatic weapons, on destructive devices. they were
Yep.
sidestepping the Second Amendment by saying, well, we're not infringing them because they're not banned. You can still have whatever you want. Yeah. So that goes back to, despite my thoughts on any other local law enforcement, peacekeeping organization, police department, call it what you want, the ATF is a wholly unconstitutional and illegal branch of law enforcement. And I hope they don't kick in my door. I really like my dog, but I'm on record saying that. Once again, some toes may be harmed in the making of tonight's stream. That is what it is. I'm doing my best to be relatively unbiased here. I think Elias and I have done a fairly decent job of playing devil's advocate on this, but I'm not going to budge on that. The ATF needs to go away. The NFA needs to do so first. Sounds like fun. Going to use that to get rid of trees. Oh, man. Okay, well, kind of hard to fight the government with homemade shotguns and subguns, though. Yeah, that's true.
Which is why the Constitution had it in there to keep a hold of them.
Right.
And a hold of guns was to keep the government in check.
And the fact of the matter is, but that doesn't make it impossible.
No.
You know, we have had successes in the Middle East, but I don't think anybody would say that we've been wholly 100% successful against a ragtag group of individuals who their most effective tool is an improvised explosive device. In the Middle East, I don't have numbers here, but I feel very safe in saying that more American soldiers' lives have been lost to improvised explosive devices than any combination of firearms in the hands of the insurgents that you want to put together. Vietnam was a resounding failure. And you know, now they had manufactured weapons, but they were, on paper, the United States was the superior fighting force there. Of course, then we take into that too the fact that that was a conscripted army, and those are always less effective. But, going through, we've got some good chat going on tonight. I like it. Tommy gun was $200 in the 30s, and when you scale that out, that'd be like $7,500 today. So, and once again, that made it became famous as a gangster tool, the old Chicago typewriter. Because though it was unregulated, it was just financially difficult for a regular individual to own.
Right.
And legitimately, most people would not say, yeah, I think I want to grab a Thompson with my hard-earned money. When honestly, if I was going to have any weapon of war from that era, I think that the M1 would have been a better choice. More controllable, better effect on target. Not the same psychological effect, but especially when you take, the fact that you've got to feed those, and ammunition has never been the cheapest thing you could buy. Joe doesn't see why suppressors are illegal in any capacity. I absolutely agree. It had to do with the fact that in the 30s they were determined to be an assassin's weapon, or an assassin's tool. The irony of this is that as restrictive as Great Britain or the United Kingdom is on firearms as a whole, suppressors are no more difficult to get than any firearm that you might want to put it on. As a matter of fact, it's kind of expected that if you've got a firearm, you're going to have a suppressor that will fit it. It's just kind of common courtesy. Firearms are loud. Why not make them a little bit more palatable overall? NFA started to ban handguns. Now I had not heard that, but it would not surprise me. thought it was a bit too far and thought the handgun ban would come later. And they've tried several times. That's why short rifles and short shotguns were banned, so you couldn't make a handgun. Silencers were thrown kind of as an afterthought since they were planning to regulate and ban everything. Yeah. You know, and none of that surprises me, because once again, the statists have the Second Amendment. I won't say it's necessarily the most important amendment, but it's the teeth in the Bill of Rights. I think that's a safe way to say it. Would you agree?
Yeah.
So. Well, that was impassioned. And I'd say I'm not sorry for any of it unless I misspoke. Yeah. So, really appreciate the great chat tonight. You guys who are watching add just as much to the conversation as Elias and I prepare to come into this. Hopefully we can remember it, because we have some homework to do before the next one. But I really appreciate you guys. Once again, if you'd like to grab yourself some channel merchandise, you can do that over on the Teespring store. There's a link in the description, or you can go to bit.ly/TR-merch. We've got some t-shirts, we've got some coffee cups. The channel does... I've clicked the wrong thing again. Did I mute myself this time? That's how I muted myself last week, is I clicked the wrong thing. Anyway, using Teespring, the channel does get just a couple dollars off of every purchase. And I'm sorry, there's not a lot I can do about the wonky way they handle shipping. One of these days I will be big enough to partner with one of the more common Pro 2A branding groups out there. Joe, I'm glad you can make it tonight. I appreciate your service. I've always appreciated your friendship. If you guys see anything on Instagram where I'm doing something really crazy or stupid for a workout, there's a good chance that the idea came from Joe. If you ever want to make Romanian deadlifts even more terrible, stand on an elastic band and throw that around your neck. That was horrible. So Joe, I'm glad you joined us, and I wish I could say I had a quick primer on the NFA. Honestly, I think that probably your best source for that is probably Mr. Guns and Gear. He's got some really good stuff on suppressors. He's got a good series he's working on full auto stuff. He has a class 7 SOT, so he even does cool things like show you everything but the actual smithing involved, putting stuff together. So that's the whole reason that I know what the cost is on a brand new full auto lower. Anyway, you guys, once again, I'm going to say it one more time. If you're not following the channel on social media, you should do that. Those links are in the description. Or if you just want to search Facebook or Instagram, it's Tactical Review 2019. Elias is also on Facebook. It's Liberty Review 1776, like your website, isn't it?
Yep.
All right. So you guys can give him a follow, and I have seen the evidence that he is getting very close to deploying episode 2 of the Liberty Review podcasts. So,
yeah, probably here in the next couple days.
And
then for those who want to keep hearing more about police militarization, I think I'm going to talk about that one in the next episode, because yeah, it's definitely
it's a really good discussion. And once again, if all parties will come to the table with an open mind, it doesn't have to be an us versus them thing. And honestly, right. I think I'm going to walk on some eggshells here. I don't know that from the civilian side, us adopting an us versus them mindset is
No.
going to help the situation. Now, before you ask me how the boot polish tastes, I think that I can say that without having to be called a bootlicker, because I'm not saying that there's no responsibility to be had. I'm not saying that they need unilateral power. I'm saying that they're, once again, part of the judicial system needs to be people empowered to have some authority,
Right.
But they need to be accountable, and accountable to the civilian populace as a whole. Elias, what's your YouTube channel?
No YouTube channel. Well, I mean, there is one that technically exists, but what I'm doing is podcast right now. So I've been asked a couple times. I might take that to doing it on video instead of just audio, but I'm not there yet.
Well, and something you can do is get you a tasteful still shot and just throw your audio behind that, and that can be your uploads to your YouTube channel.
True.
Maybe not the picture of you staring at the camera, because everybody found that a little unnerving that the time I had to do that.
So not this one.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you guys for joining. Mark 18, you mentioned Lieutenant Colonel David Grossman. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. He is the one with the sheepdogs, and wolves, right? Is that Grossman? Let's while
Yeah, I'll give it a second.
yeah, while I'm waiting on them, sheepdogs, and wolf. And yes, he is the one who, it's from the book On Combat. And here's the thing, there's a lot of guys who really don't like, okay, and there we go, with the delay. A lot of people really don't like that concept. And
Yep.
My take on that is that it applies, well, for one thing, any analogy is going to break down if you look at it too far.
Right.
Okay. But my take is, if we're going to use that analogy, that all of us who choose to take up the role of an armed defender, who choose to take on the mantle of our own first responder, because at the end of the day, we are our own first responder. Look how many police departments across the country right now are not responding to anything short of murder. And once again, that is only in an evidentiary capacity. So anyway, so for every one of us who has taken on that mantle of personal protector, we are sheepdogs, if we want to use that analogy. The wolves are obviously the bad people. Now, the problem comes into when a police officer or a police department takes on that us versus them mentality. In their eyes, every one of us who are planning to be our own first responders have become wolves. And then the other place where this breaks down, and this was pointed out to me very angrily one time when I used the sheepdog thing. There's just been too many times where the sheepdog has been the one who attacked the sheep. And so once again, that's where any analogy, we're not animals. And in every situation, we all have to make our own choices. John Lovell of the Warrior Poet Society one time said, past bravery is not necessarily an indication of future bravery. And so that kind of goes with, you never know how you're going to react in a situation until you're in it, and you don't necessarily know that you'll react the same way next time. So, speaking of Warrior Poet Society, shout out to a much bigger channel. That's backwards from how it should be, but I really love what I see from the Warrior Poet Society, and they are launching a new network, the Warriors Poet Society Network. If you go to their website, and I don't have that linked, content starts dropping June 1st. It is a paid service, but they are creating their own platform so that they can get away from YouTube and big social media, who are showing themselves to be, and always have shown themselves to be, very state-minded and very anti-gun. So anyway, let's just keep moving towards wrapping this up. I have begged for your money and for you guys to give me some free advertisement. So like I said, follow on social media if you want. You don't have to. I'm not your real dad. So Mark 18 once liked John Lovell until he interviewed David Grossman. And keep in mind, none of us are going to agree on all points. I'd say Elias and I are very like-minded, and even at that, we're going to run across things where we don't see eye to eye. We have run across things where we don't see eye to eye, and yet here we are, hosting constitutional considerations together, and with no intention of stopping that, because it's dangerous to stick your head in an echo chamber. Not every idea is necessarily equally valid, but every person has an equal right to their ideas. So, and I respect, you don't have to watch anybody. This could be the very last anything you watch on this channel, and that's your right. I find that on most points I agree with what John says and what he seems to be trying to do, and that is help people become better protectors and better scholars. And so anyway, yeah, I think that's really what I have for tonight. Elias, do you have anything? You've been kind of quiet. I think you're falling asleep.
No.
It is getting late. We have been on the air for nearly 2.5 hours. So
no, I'm good. There was a lot
to
this
unpack. And I appreciate you guys staying with me. As always, if you guys have subject ideas, if there's major news stuff that comes across the wire that you think I may have missed, you can reach out to me either on Facebook or Instagram, or email me. My channel email is in the About page for on the YouTube channel. Or, I mean, it's tacticalreview@protonmail.com. But if you want a clickable link, or you're not going to remember that, you can do that. And let's face it, I've even done a couple of product reviews. Fair warning, I don't think that for the foreseeable future I'm going to be ordering products from China to review. I haven't been able to find any Lysol, and those won't come into my house without.
Those are probably also made in China.
Anyway, so yeah, all that said, guys, thanks for watching. Elias, thanks for joining. Thank you again for the legs that you put under tonight, the research that you put in on so many of our subjects tonight. Guys, until next time, shoot straight. Stay safe.